in here. Let me check the comments real quick. Okay, they're on. So I've been promising this one, so I figured it was time we touched base with it. It's the history of the top hat. Now, I started like basic searches on it, and of course, as usual, it led me to some of the same places we've already been. I wonder sometimes if when we look things up on the internet, things are just created on the fly to suit our searches. And then that would cause conflict between us, trying to communicate with each other and whatnot. I don't know. I watched an episode of Outer Limits last night where they were all signed up to the stream constantly, and they had like these little Star Trek-y devices on the side of their heads. And of course, it all went awry because it never wanted to be shut down, so it started controlling people's thoughts. So that they would always be online and whatnot, and it wanted more information constantly. It wanted to be fed. It was like a hungry monster, a bottomless pit that never got full, which is ironic. I segued over to Tophats. I was going to do a part 2 on the teeth video, but honestly, it got kind of gruesome. I have a pretty strong stomach. I'm a pretty tough girl, but not in like, I don't fight or anything like that. I have mental fortitude or whatever. But some of the teeth information got to be a little gross. So I had to take a break from that. But I thank one of our new friends for sharing some information that gave me a direction to head in with that. And to sum it up real quick, we might do another video, I don't know. The Egyptians, and that's where all this leads. I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but the back burner for like Freemasonry and some of these rituals that alleged churches do at temples are throwbacks to the Egyptian ceremonies. And I'm not the type to say everything is a demon or everything is wicked and evil, because I have looked into some of that and I'm going to continue to do so. Christ spent time in Egypt. Joseph lived in Egypt. So it's something that, I think we pick things up as we move along and as we grow as a species. And so I'm not against combining some of these things. I guess you could say in a way I've created my own religion. It's weird. And I think the best way to describe it, a lot of us talk about the dark night of the soul, and I saw a comment on that the other day. And how this person, like, they didn't fear anything else in the world except for that. And I said, well, you shouldn't fear it because it promotes a lot of spiritual growth. And as I look around me, I see everybody else getting more online and more arrogant and puffed up because you have all this information and knowledge at your fingertips, that you get to believing like you are in control of the world in a sense. And that's where some of these Gnostic concepts can get out of hand, and even the Mormonism view of how we become gods of our own realm or whatever. But Christ himself said we are little g gods. Don't ye know ye are gods? You shall judge the very angels. And so I look at that, and again, we have to have a real sense of balance. We have to know our worth, but we can't let that get ahead of us to the point where we start losing our humanity, because our humanity is in the compassion that we have for one another. And in staring at a screen all the time, all we are is images to one another at best. At worst, we are just words typed out on a keyboard. And so this causes a real crippling effect in the fabric of a society. So I don't think that cultures need to be thrown aside to the wayside. But I don't think that we need to be so superstitious that we're not willing to look at one another's perspective and knowledge base and information base, and share those in a humble and cooperative way. Should there be secrets? I don't even know if I would call them secrets so much as there is certain information you're not going to find until you look for it. And you don't know to look for it until you know. And so since this dark night of the soul began for me, the more time that passes, the more I find myself drifting off. And I think the best way to describe it is I'm in a more of a meditative state consistently throughout my day, than I used to be, and than other people are right now. And even food, it's hard. It gets hard to swallow. Animals are offensive to my system now. And I didn't ask for any of this. Again, you don't know to look for the information until you just know it and it resonates within you. I hope this makes sense. Building bridges between groups of people is not easy, but I think it's necessary. So if only one or two people are here to share what they know and to learn together, right? And so let's look at this information. Again, let's take some of the superstition out of it and just kind of look at it. And I do honestly, since this began for me, and even since almost I was a child, there are certain concepts that I've had within me that I just knew, right? That are just inherent. And some of those go along with the LDS teachings. And it's almost like I'm wondering, and again, this is a fringe theory, but if the Catholic Church was the first church, and we have the ecclesiastical history to show that it was, is the LDS the last church? I hope that makes sense. Because we're seeing all this persecution right now, and it is strictly at Mormonism. There's a lot of lawsuits going on right now there, and against the Catholics. But we know this is all a show as well. So we have to be very careful. We have to be very well balanced. And this is where our judgment needs to be righteous. And by righteous judgment, you judge by the character that a person exudes and lives by, and not so much by maybe how they appear on the outside, or even their culture, something they are born into that is none of their own doing. So I hope that makes sense. And I've rambled long enough. Everybody left. I'm sorry. That kind of stinks. But let's get to it. I just like to give people a chance to stop in. So yes, when I got to the top hat, now if you think about it, let's look at a few images first. Throughout history, top hats have kind of exuded a sense of status, a certain status quo, if you will. And we've seen top hats on characters, everything from the Monopoly Man to Abraham Lincoln, who is, he was very against slavery. And I think he's one of the heroes of American history and culture. Then you see them on people like, see here you have Abraham Lincoln. And he's got his that's a stovepipe top hat because it's so long. The one next to him, near the tent string or pulley, I forget what you call it, guideline, you see the Mason signal with the guy having his hand in his shirt, in his jacket. You see it there? These older pictures. Things don't translate as well into digital, and we are really at a loss there as well. It's not something that is quote unquote better. But anyway, carry on. That's a bowler hat on the one who's giving that Mason signal there. That's called a bowler hat. My dad and my uncle were really into Civil War history. We went to Gettysburg, and Pittsburgh is full of its own landmarks and whatnot. So it's a big part. It was a big part of my personal life. There you go. There's a restored image. You can tell it's restored by the color and the crispness and the way the background has been kind of blurred a little bit and the touch-ups. But there, yes, you see Abraham Lincoln, one of the quote-unquote good guys of American history. Now they're turning him into a bad guy, of course. Some of these other guys I do know, but there we have another. And this is a picture, right, available on Wikipedia. We have a Mason, a Grand Mason. See? Okay, and if we go Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka had the top hat, right? Keep it under your hat. If you've ever heard that saying, that's one of the Marx Brothers. If you've ever heard the saying, keep it under your hat, somebody would say something to you, you'd be talking to them, and they'd say, but keep that under your hat. Just like we say today, or in my generation said, keep it on the DL, on the down low. Don't tell nobody else, it's between you and I. Put it in the vault, as they would say on Seinfeld. So keep it under your hat literally meant to keep your thoughts, keep that thought in your mind. Don't speak it, right? Keep it a secret. So keep it under your hat. And the taller the hat, would that then signify the more secrets that person had and was keeping? Or maybe the further they got in certain ranks? I think that's possible. Let me see. What's his face, Slash? With his top hat and the dark sunglasses, you can never see their eyes. The Penguin of Gotham City. Okay. He's a bad guy. Robert Patterson, that looks like a fake image somebody made. There we have a female one. Clockwork Orange. Another one where they wore the bowlers. They were the gang of scamps. And this is, what was that called? Shoot, I can't remember that. Gangs of New York. There's that movie. Over and over and over again, you see the redundancy. Alice in Wonderland and Johnny Depp. Each one of these goes along with a mind control issue, persona, problem. You see the Clockwork Orange, and he has his one eye done up. Okay. And so even JFK had times where he wore his. And on it goes. So, Uncle Sam, W.C. Fields, Fred Astaire, who I loved, Ebenezer Scrooge, the Mad Hatter, the Cat in the Hat. Okay. Let's go back. And there. Okay. So, real quick, let's do a real quick background on the top hat and figure out why it is so intermingled or interwoven with secrecy and illusion. A top hat is a cylinder hat, informally a topper, a tall, flat-crowned hat traditionally associated with formal wear in Western dress codes, meaning white tie, morning dress, or frock coat. Traditionally made of black silk or sometimes gray, the top hat emerged in Western fashion by the end of the 18th century. Although it declined by the time of the counterculture of the 1960s, it remains a formal fashion accessory. A collapsible variant of a top hat, developed in the 19th century, is known as an opera hat. So you could put it down so that the patrons behind you could see the opera. Okay? And again, I know this might be boring for certain people, but this is doing due diligence because, again, I found some, of course, conspiratorial or fringe things tied to this. So I want to make sure I have a proper understanding of when it came into being and why and by whom. After World War I, the 20s saw widespread introduction of semi-formal black tie and informal wear suits that were worn with less formal hats, such as the bowler hats, like in Clockwork Orange, and fedoras, respectively, in established society. After World War II, top hats started to become confined to high society, so they're a status symbol. In the last U.S. presidential inaugurations with top hat was the inauguration of John F. Kennedy. So we have that little tie there to the Mandela effect, which ironically, I was looking up Berenstain Bear memorabilia yesterday because I just wanted to find something and prove to people that it's just a brand change. And of course, I couldn't find anything, even on Etsy, which was discouraging. So I got disappointed over that. Anyways, so it was a status symbol, and it was a part of American fabric, so much so that it was a part of the presidential inaugurations until 1961. The U.S. used to go about things with, and the world did too, like Germany, Russia, everybody, when they were able to, when there was an economic depression, people had a sense of propriety and at least social appearances as to not be constantly attacking each other or crossing people's personal boundaries or invading their space and or privacy. So we have to, again, have some balance when looking at illusion and secrecy, because at times it is simply just one person's, preference to keep certain things not hidden, but they just don't talk about them. There are things that I find in the Essene Gospels now. I told you the compilation in one book right now that I'm reading through, and it's basically an instruction manual. It's like everything that should have been included, I think, with the Gospels. It's stuff that I noticed. Again, you don't know what to look for until you know what to look for. When these things started happening with my body and when animals started becoming offensive to me, I started looking into that, and I found that actually what started it for me was Da Vinci, was the painting of the Last Supper. You don't see anything on that table but bread. There's nothing else there. And I think that spoke volumes. And then again, if you look at the one time Christ lost his temper, it was when the animals were tied up in the temple. It wasn't just because they were exchanging monies. Those animals were to be sacrificed for people's sins. And he said, how much is it for you to just obey your Father in heaven than to kill, and shed blood for your offenses? And this is where I think oftentimes it's our perspectives as human beings are skewed a little bit, because we're in the flesh and we're looking from these eyes, and because we're not feeding that spirit man inside, we're only feeding the body. And so what people don't understand, though, is the spirit will be okay if the body gets ill or whatever. The spirit can still be strong. But the other way around, if the spirit is ill, then everything else is ill too. Again, I'm not meaning to preach. I apologize, if I get off track. Again, I would really like to do just a serious video about that, about the Essene Gospels and, all the commonalities when you look at the ecclesiastical history and the pictures that were painted back then. They were trying to tell us things. And this is the problem, is look at how upset you might get when I say that, my own body, and I'm not judging you. I'm saying in my journey where I'm at right now, my body is offended when I put animal into my mouth. And I don't judge you at all, because I've been a person who fell and I couldn't get back up. I kept trying to do life without my spirit, without tending to spirit, without touching base with the God within and the God without, the Holy Spirit within, to talk to God, the God without that made us. And I kept failing, every time, I was successful at jobs and whatnot, but life I was just not great at. And I kept trying to do everything by my own, carnal power. But if your spirit is sick, it's kind of like if the transmission goes on your car, nothing else is going to work. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to go somewhere really deep with that, but that's not what we're talking about right now. Anyways, if you would like to know more about that book, and if you would like to talk about observations like that, please do let me know. I don't think you can go live. I don't remember what the restrictions are now, but I'm going to start posting that type of information onto Striving to be a Saint, just so you guys know. So the origin of the top hat, now this is where it gets funny. It is widely reported that the inventor of the top hat was a haberdasher by the name of John Hetherington, who in 1797 walked the streets of London in his new invention, and it caused a riot. When I first started looking at this, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. It caused a riot because of their hats, and that's what we see played out, I think, in the Gangs in New York movie. I only saw that one once, I think, all the way through. That wasn't one of my favorites or whatever. You could tell it was very propaganda driven. Excuse me. But a haberdasher, now I just want to show you, because back in the day, again, this is how my dad spoke, and people would say in our common vernacular, oh, that's just haberdashery. And it was an insult, right? So a haberdasher basically meant salesman. It was a salesman or snake oil salesman that would be in the old westerns. You'd see them ride up in their wagon and they'd start shouting from their cart, and the women of the town would go out and check their wares. So it's not necessarily a good thing, right? Especially when you think of like traveling salesmen. There was never a good connotation with that, because you knew that salesman was up to no good and up to something else. And it used to be thought that the devil would show up at your door in a suit and tie because he would be as slick as a salesman. And so suits and ties were equated. They weren't good things back in the day. Your Sunday best wouldn't be a suit and a tie. It would be, a button-down shirt, some pants, and maybe some suspenders. But you wouldn't be wearing like a suit like that, because it was reserved for higher status, which meant more money, which meant less honest. And people knew this. These were common beliefs not too long ago. And for whatever reason, the generation before mine and this current one, you see people get caught up in the glamorous lifestyle of like celebrities, not understanding that there's not good effects, from these things. So another area where we also see top hats is in Dr. Sleep, where it is related to the adrena chroma issue. So we're going to look into the symbolism of the top hat, which it symbolizes status, power, and masculinity. Men who wanted to get ahead in Victorian society had to wear a topper, and yet they complained bitterly about this tyrannical accessory. Now, why do people hate it so much? Well, number one, it was kind of rude. People couldn't see around you, and it was like the taller your hat, the higher your status. And I guess it was seen as arrogant and obnoxious, because you're not supposed to, what's the word I'm looking for? Flaunt things like that. Back then, again, in a polite society, it could cause friction. Perhaps inspired by the early modern era, Capitan, higher crowned, dark felt hats with wide brims emerged as a country leisure wear along with the Age of Revolution around the 1770s. So for some reason it is related, and it says they call it a tyrannical. How can a hat be tyrannical? No thanks. No. Sorry. And it is related to the royals. And again, we have the royal family, who allegedly may or may not be involved in Freemasonry, although a couple of them came out openly and said they were not part of that organization. We have to be very careful who's being villainized today, because where you see the crowd go is usually the wrong way. So it caused a riot. Legend has it the women fainted, children screamed, and dogs yelped at the sight of the silk top hat, which had a shiny luster and was calculated to frighten timid people. Silk top hats were made with unique fabric called silk plush, which has a long nap, giving the hat its shine, which was stretched over a hard gossamer shell. So it's not vegan friendly. In 1968, the only factory that produced silk plush ceased production. Hence, today there's a finite supply of silk top hats in the world. So now they're like rare, and they're a collector's item if you can find one made of silk. So again, there's not a lot of information given as to why a fashion accessory would cause a riot. I find that very interesting. Again, we see these spiritual manifestations taking place, and we have to work backwards and figure out, okay, where is this spirit coming from, and why is it attached to this inanimate object? I guess that makes more sense to say it that way. So I found a few interesting things, and let's... History of the top hat. Is that what I wanted to... I wanted to look up the symbolism. There we go. There we go. If you want to get ahead, get a hat. So again, it was a status symbol. So we're going to go... Oh, authority and power, this one says. The covered head shows nobility, and different hats signify different orders within the social hierarchy. Removal of a hat upon entry into a building shows respect. Yes, me and my grandma would wear little hats or something up on our heads, sometimes to church, but my dad, upon entering church, would take his hat off. Because that's just... Now here we get down to the nitty-gritty. Why are top hats worn by magicians? So again, keep it under your hat conveys that you have a secret. And if you watch a magic show, they keep reaching into this hat that seems never ending, but we know that it's not. So where does this illusion come from? And you have more of the watch this hand, not the hidden hand, right? Type of thing. And that's what illusion really is. You get people to look in a certain direction, and you do the trick in the other direction, and where they're not looking, the trick is to get them not to see it and to do it quick enough as to not arouse suspicion. These are things I seem to know a lot about. Okay, so in art, it's status resistance. Okay, so then there again, we get this like protestive type of attitude related to this inanimate object, cultural identity and celebration. Okay, someone in a particular situation who is acting for morally bad reasons or something that shows who this person is. The group is considered kind of a black hat in the consulting business. So that's where you get those sayings from. So the magic hat enables the wearer to penetrate unseen boundaries, enter into the inner world and supernatural world. So we're going to click on that. Now, again, you have witches also. In cartoons, and Halloween costumes, I've never known a real Wiccan to actually walk about in a hat like this, to be honest with you. I don't relate Wiccans to witches, although the Catholic Church does. I think there's some room for a dialogue there because they're not what should be perceived as to be witches, especially if the Bible says, suffer not a witch to live. These are things we have to take serious, especially if we're going to say, okay, we believe the Bible is true. Well, then what does this mean? Again, I don't think they are human beings at a certain point. I think if we look into witches' symbolism, I think they were cannibals of children. And that's what Hansel and Gretel, the story, was all about. She wanted to feed them to fatten them up. Just like when you see in the Bugs Bunny cartoons, she will have Bugs Bunny in the cauldron, and he thinks she's giving him a bath, and he's like just loving it as she's cooking him. So we are going to click on that one above there, but I wanted to, and there you see some esoteric symbolism. There you go. Why do magicians wear? Right there. We're going to click on that. Okay. So hold please. We're going to go back up here. Oh, this is what I wanted to show you guys. I thought this was so weird. Why is top hat symbolism? Let's do that so it's easier for you guys to see if you're watching. Well, if anyone's here, please do give the video a thumbs up because I'm still showing 0, but I'm showing a couple thumbs up. So top hat symbolism. Oops, let me make sure. Those are working. Oh, and look at this. This is funny because what did TV start with? We saw the symbolism of the bat, and I did a video on how if you zoomed into some of the pictures of the troops arriving in New York that allegedly weren't arriving in New York, and they had the badges that said Project Gotham on them. So remember these things, keep them under your hats, and remember them. We've also talked about the spiritual connotations of a woman covering her head and how that's possibly related to telepathy. These beings seem able to interpret your thoughts, and so do some humans. And so if you want to keep your thoughts your own, if someone who's not very kind and does not respect sovereignty per se, and they want to read your thoughts, again, I don't think chips or anything are needed for this. The only thing the chip would be to literally have you online and to monitor you. But the telepathic aspect, I don't think anything is needed to do that. These beings, whatever they are, whatever else that's here with us, entities seem able to interpret our thoughts. So if we cover our heads, does that keep it under your hat? Does that also allude to the fact that perhaps that is a sign as to where I do not consent to anyone getting into my thoughts, into my mind? So let's think about that as we again talk about sovereignty and what that has to do with our everyday operations and how we function. So bat people of Wasteland think quite highly of themselves. They know they are superior to others. Okay, what is this? Bat people. Hold, please. Where did I find this? What is this? World Anvil. Go to Flat Earth homepage. Symbolism of clothing. Okay, let's click on. What does bat people mean? Mysterious peach. Wait. When the apocalypse happened, people had to do what they could to survive and retreat wherever. So is this an arc? I am a game master, and Arthur, I am an artist community. Ah, okay. Wow, this is like a serious arc. Wasteland. Bat people look very similar to ancient humans and also mole people. They have pale skin and generally dark hair, most commonly black. Wow, do you see how I fall into this weird stuff? Our society is so bizarre. Why it has something to do with flat Earth, that's all I wanted to see is how they related it to flat Earth. What is a top hat? Okay, so we know. Oh, the colors of the ribbon are generally used to convey one's sensual orientation. This is an important point for reasons such as the fact that bat people take a lot of inspiration for their lifestyle from a time period where any sensual orientation other than being would land you in a mental asylum. Wow. The meanings of top hat colors. Now, top hats themselves can be any color most appropriate to fit into the color theme of the rest of the outfit, but the color of the ribbon around the top hat's base usually has a message. White, silver, or gray. Don't bother this person with your advances. Gold, yellow, a person is made. Black, in mourning. Okay, so I don't know what this is about. Settlements and wastelands. Some examples of top hats. So this is a whole online game thing. Wow. Okay. Whatever floats your boat, I guess. And remember, this is a research with me, so it's supposed to be raw. Yeah. Okay, so I have to see why they're relating it to Freemasonry here. This is the same thing we had pulled up already. Okay. Morning dress. We looked at that. It also remains formal dress of those occupying prominent positions in a certain traditional British institute, such as the Bank of England. So if you see somebody wearing one, they are part of the Bank of England. City Stock Exchange officials, occasionally at the law courts in Lincoln's Inn, judges of the Chancery Division and King's Council, boy choristers of the King's College Choir, dressage horseback riders. Wow. Okay. Oh, and Scrooge McDuck, and Scrooge of the Charles Dickens story. So they have them as well. The history, we see how it starts out, and as time goes on, it gets taller. It's been made out of silk, beaver cloth. Abraham Lincoln really brought it into fashion, or into the public awareness, I guess. In this popular print of 1848, 5 Days of Milan, the Italian city's uprising against Austrian rule, several combatants are shown wearing top hats. I don't understand what that signifies, though, like why it's a tyrannical thing. Prince Albert started wearing them in 1850, the silk ones, and then they start being putting on the Ritz. They started being equated to a real sense of status. Bank of England, Dwight D. Eisenhower, blah, 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 horse racing, Winston Churchill. The inauguration of JFK. Okay. I want to look. Oh my gosh, and even Punxsutawney Phil's person that holds him has a. And to me, again, if you see it, it almost means like the number 33. It means there's a fast one being pulled here, and it's not actually what it's being presented to you as. There it is. In Freemasonry, as practiced in North America, lodges, top hats are often associated with the position of worshipful master. And see, that's my problem. I got a big problem with that. Why are you going to call somebody else worshipful master, but say that you're not allowed to, they look at Christ as a deity. They think he's like a lower deity than God. And I mean, I'm not going to debate that with anyone at this point in time right now in this video. But if that's true, and they can only look to God as the grand architect, then why are they calling brothers worshipful master? Even if it's only one per lodge, the grand poobah, like on the Flintstones. And it's just so, I don't know. Some secrets are okay. Some secrets I don't know. Anyways, the master is not obliged to wear a top hat and can wear whatever type of hat he deems appropriate for the occasion. This is because there are varying degrees of formality in different lodges, from formal wear to everyday dress. It is also common for a worshipful master to receive top hat related trinkets and gifts on either the day of his installation or as a going away present. In other countries, especially in certain systems in Germany, top hats are worn by all members of the lodge. Oh wow, Judaism. Here we go. In some synagogues, the president and honorary officers may wear a top hat on Shabbat or the great festivals. The custom of wearing a top hat, or I apologize if I butcher this, but I like to try. Zylinder, that might be silent, Zylinder in the Yiddish language, originated in 19th century England, replacing the wig and tricorn hat. The custom became widespread in Europe until the Holocaust. Wow, I had no idea it was related to Judaism at all. So then we got into talking about what it's made from. All right. So I saw another one where it was related to Joseph Smith. And of course, we've stumbled into his information when looking at Freemasonry. And when you look at the rituals that they have, at least what you can look at online and on YouTube and whatnot, it is very reminiscent of the same vows that the Freemasons take as well. But again, they don't look at death the same way that most people do, much like I don't, being brought up knowing I have a spirit, knowing that we have the opportunity to be eternal. I've never perceived it in the same way as other people either, and some of you might be able to relate to that. So again, let's look at this with balance in mind. So, magicians. Why do they wear top hats? We already know what they are. Why do magicians wear them? It draws attention to them, makes the magicians stand out in order to make themselves more visible. Like I said, in high society, it can be considered rude to wear your hat into a show or a presentation or a synagogue because mainly the people behind you cannot see, like in operas and whatnot. It's also part of the magician's costume. Yes, but why? creative, artistic. See, and this is them looking at it from, of course, the superficial angle. So we might have to get out of here. All right, so I want to find out. Now, again, this is a more high status link, I guess you would say. Do we still get the picture? Usually they keep the picture. A telling aspect of the magic hat as a physical thing is that its form is often mundane, appearing in the shape of a traveler's or laborer's hat, such as the cap or a simple fedora. Described as a coarse felt hat in English play about a wishing hat. And see, there you get the little old worn out hat has strange properties. It is similar defined in many stories. Who else wears a top hat? The little leprechauns. In the pictures you see of them in the ancient folklore, you always see them in a little top hat, and they are sneaky buggers. They are always scheming. They are always in some type of deceptive act. When you read about lore and tales and whatnot of the leprechaun, they're always them and sprites and some fairies. They can be sneaky little buggers. The magic hat's association with the commonplace has continued into modern times. It's linked to the wealthy Harry Potter sorting hat, proving there's nothing in your head the sorting hat can't see. A wizard's hat also. They are people who are signified as wearing bigger, taller hats, okay? Etymological root of the word cap, hate or hut, is connecting the Britain word capan, meaning wattle huts or cabins. She sees the cap as a covering akin to architecture. Okay, that's weird. The Century Dictionary connects cap to words for cover, such as hood, cowl, and the like, but finds the connection to hut uncertain. However, it is not far-fetched that the word cap is about covering. It is a derivative of capon, which from cow and cloak evolved. And cloaks, they are also something that magicians will wear, and you will see them disappear in the movies and whatnot, usually with a top hat, too, they wear. To set one's cap meant to deceive, beguile, or cheat. Like, I'm setting my cap for that woman. I will take, and you see a lot of old movies, you mean to acquire that thing by any means possible, okay? So you see that this is used ever, and it comes, here we go. The cap that can conceal, beguile, or cheat is a recurring feature of the magic hat. One of the earliest known versions is that of the magic felt pileus worn by the ancient Greek god Hermes. There we go again with the Greek gods. See how you just stumble into these things, all these things that are prevalent in society today, and all the things that have to do with secrets and whatnot. They all seem to connect underneath it all. Thanks for being here. I'm sorry if this is a boring one. So Hermes is connected to the magic hat. I might have to do a short on that. Shaped like a small cone with no brim, was common headgear among working men. Hermes' hat hid him in invisibility and could transport him through flight. A trickster god of theft, as well as the deity who took the dead to the underworld. So there again we have that reference to death and a trickster and the underworld. All these things our society, or at least the elitists of our society, seem obsessed with. And it's constantly pushing out the same messages over and over and over again. And, these screens that we look at are the images of the beast, and we worship them by being on them so much. Worship is where you spend most of your time. And I believe that Biden or the one before him gave the power to the beast. And I think that's why we're seeing so many strange things in the news outlets and whatnot. And this is why I believe you can't believe everything you read, especially right now. You have to be very careful with the information that you are acquiring. These are important details and observations to make so that you yourself and your families are not deceived by what's happening around you. Don't rely on the screen. Don't rely on the people within the screen. Show compassion to your fellow man. Make your own small corner of the world a little brighter. I think we've all got so caught up in being, wow, we can connect with people halfway across the world, that we've forgotten how to connect with the person sitting across from us at the table. And that is a big thing for me personally. That has a lot to do with trust issues that I have now because of the trauma that occurred to me when all this kicked off and the dark night of the soul thing kind of began for me. But then you go on journeys like this and you learn things that maybe you would never have learned otherwise. Like I said, the Essene books are pretty much a manual on how to be healed and how to cure yourself and how to live long lives and how to, by extension, become eternal. And these things are hidden for a reason, and you don't know to look for them until your spirit tells you, until your spirit knows. Funny how your spirit knows things before your body does. But most of us don't pay attention to the spirit anymore, to that instinct within. And we have to practice again. And a part of that practice is looking at the information and deciphering, okay, can I believe this? Is this true or not? So Hermes was a trickster god of theft, as well as the deity who took the dead to the underworld. And we're seeing that a lot now. Kamala Harris, she did that coffin symbolism with the arms across the chest. The way that you see the sarcophaguses of mummies of, what is it, Babylonian nobility, Egyptian nobility, how they are in their quote-unquote death masks. And Elon Musk just did it a few days ago. And again, with them saying dead people voted, there have been a few moments where I've wondered if I haven't just died and come to my own little universe because of the things that I say happening and occurring. But again, you have to be very careful with that because we are not the God. We are not creator God. We are just, can be in cooperation with natural law, aka, God's works. We can be in cooperation with and in harmony with what's around us, and function at a higher maturity, I think. I don't know what I was going for there. I apologize. His Peleus appears in the Homeric epic. So Homer wrote these epics, and this one is called the Iliad, where it was lent to the divine Athene to conceal her in battle. So we have this cap that is worn that is also an invisibility cloak. Oftentimes you see cloaks are what? They're like hoods. People wear hoodies today, and that's equivalent to what used to be like a cloak. And cloaks had a hood upon them. And I think that the invisibility factor is because, as I said, the higher in frequency you get, which means the less you break natural laws, the higher your frequency and vibration goes. So these negative entities can't attach to you. And you're closer to the angelic ones who can assist you. And so more information is given to you. But when more knowledge is given to you, more responsibility is also given to you. So do you share the information with others, or do you wait until they seek it from you because maybe they're not ready for it yet? We have to be very well balanced, and I don't think the people who released the internet and brought it into being, I don't think they were careful or cautious enough with what they were doing. And again, they got arrogant, and I wouldn't doubt some deal was made with them because obviously this existed. There's nothing new under the sun. And water would be really interesting. If God made a flood, why would he want a flood? Well, floods can ruin electronics. He must have known it wouldn't kill the Nephilim for good. But he knew, water. The Egyptians were smart. The Sumerians, they put things in stone, right? They were wise about that. But a flood, right? Just follow me for a minute. That could potentially ruin a lot of scrolls and parchments and electronics, maybe. Things that we shouldn't have had available to us. And they shouldn't be available to us now. And I believe that's what happened with Lamech in the beginning of the Mormon church. I think he sold out to the fallen ones, the women of his family, and married them off to the fallen ones in exchange for the technology. And I think that's probably why you see the cap related to Joseph Smith. So I want to show you guys this before I end this installment. This is basically just an intro. But check this out. And this is what I often say. So please refrain from making a judgment call until you hear this a little bit, okay? Joseph Smith had this hat. Allegedly, he had a seer stone, and he would put this seer stone. This is how he got information. Basically, this is called casting lots, and it's actually in the Bible. It's also called divination to an extent. Hear me here, because this is going to take some discernment on your part. I can't tell you what to believe. But once Judas was no longer an apostle and Christ was deceased, the apostles drew lots. And a lot is like straws. You know how back in the day they would say, here, pick a straw, or you flip a coin and they'd say, pick a side or whatever. That's basically when the person cannot make a decision and they cannot hear God. They don't feel like God is, maybe they feel like something's wrong with their hearing of God at that time. They cast lots. And I will show you what that is. And we've talked about this. Now, certain churches will tell you that this is witchcraft. If it's witchcraft, then you ask them why it's in the Bible and why the prophets were told to use certain gemstones and why each one was ascribed to a certain tribe. All of these things are attached. Joseph Smith might be under severe persecution because he's doing things that the quote-unquote secular church, when I say secular, I mean 501(c), I mean the ones in line with the government, I mean back in the day, the ones who were Pharisees. That's who I'm speaking of when I say they in this regard. Some Catholics would probably call me a heretic. Some Christians would call me a heretic for just talking about this. But it needs talked about because people don't read anymore, and they're not reading their own Bibles, and they're just believing what they are being told. And you need to decide for yourself if something is true. And how can you do that if you've not exposed your own eyes and ears to that information yourself, on your own, in your own quiet time, where there's no other voices outside trying to influence you? Think about that for a minute. These things that we're told are pagans or come from pagans, that part might be true. It might be blended with our cultures. But this is something that has been done since the beginning of time. If you flip a coin, heads or tails, if you do that with your spouse, the loser does the laundry, the church should be telling you then, hey, you're messing with divination. It's the same. These are all the same things. We cannot be hypocrites. The worst thing for me, after being like a murderer or whatever, a child harmer, would be being a hypocrite. Would be telling people one thing and doing something else. That's why I can't tell people certain things, because I've done that. I can't judge you, I've done it. But I can empathize with you more that way because I've been there. But I do know the saving power of grace and how grace can reform and reconcile a person back to their own spirit and then back to the spirit of the one who made them. This is why people like me do this. We don't do it for popularity. We don't want that stuff. It's about bringing to light certain things that are being mistaught. And it doesn't mean I'm smarter than anyone else. Look, other people came before me. Bigger people with more credibility than me. So that's who I try to point to show you guys, look at this information and see what it says. So according to the LDS theology, seer stones were used by Joseph Smith, as well as ancient prophets, to receive revelations from God. That is true. You might not agree, but if you go read it yourself, I promise you it's in there. And it talks about them casting lots to find the replacement apostle for Judas. It talks about Aaron, Moses' brother, putting the gemstones that God told them to on his vest so that when he went to talk with God, God's light would not harm him. And I believe that had a lot to do with what we call radiation today. It just means we're not shiny enough yet to be in that presence. Anyways, they also believe that the Bible, I guess, is the Word of God, but it's not inerrant, meaning there were things maybe that were said that are not appropriate or are not. Christ himself told us that beware of the scribes. He told us that they were liars. And there's a lot that we're told about his life that I don't think is true, and all you have to do is look. There are things that Christ did not do throughout the entire Bible, though they insist he did. But he didn't. I didn't see him doing any. So we have to be well balanced when looking at these things. So these stones, basically, it's something that you do to better interact with God, right? Because we're not with God right now. So we maybe sometimes, we use a telephone, right, to talk to somebody who lives in another state. This is the same concept. So we can't be hypocrites and tell people this is bad, this is wicked, this is witchcraft. Do you have a wedding ring on? Are you wearing a diamond ring? Do you have a birthstone on? Do you look at those things? Because that's the same thing. Okay? And all people like me are trying to do is point out, don't be in error along with those who are teaching you, because, the scales of justice, God, Jesus, whoever you believe pronounces judgment, there will be some type of balance to meet. And, you want to try and clean up your messes at this point. That's all I can offer as far as advice goes. So he picked these stones out of a hat to better understand what God wanted him to do at certain times. So the culture that the early LDS developed in was steeped in Western esotericism, which included American folk magic practices. Again, I believe that the Native American Indians are a lost tribe. They might very well be the original Jews. I know people aren't going to agree with me there. Again, this is information I believe that was a concept that was given to me, and then I started researching it to see if it was true, and I have found information that is older than recent history, as to where other people have pointed this out as well. So I'm not the first, probably won't be the last. However, it would be really nice if we all could live in that time of peace and harmony that is spoke of. And now, a seer stone in this culture was a prevalent divination tool used for a form of crystal gazing or scrying. Same thing for the water, those who would find water with the diviners, with the rods. That's a form of divination as well. The term Urim and Thummim is usually used by Latter-day Saint members to refer to the interpreters mentioned in the Book of Mormon. Some LDS use the term Urim and Thummim as seer stones interchangeably. Smith owned at least 2 seer stones before his early 20s, when he had employed them for treasure seeking at the bequest of Josiah Stowell before he founded the church. Other early Mormons, such as Hiram Page, David Whitmer, and Jacob Whitmer, also used seer stones. Okay? All of these organizations, though, what I dislike the most is how they treat their females. There's a real hypocrisy with it in every church. It's a really big problem. They tell us that we're free, but I haven't seen that in a proper way. And I'm not speaking of today's feminism, because that's not, that's a cult too. So Smith's usual procedure was to place the stone in a white stovepipe hat, which is considered a pure color. Like when we burn candles, they're supposed to be just white candles, or at least if they're, beeswax, of beeswax, something natural. When we pray or in honor of a deceased family member, some cultures will light a candle. Catholics can do this as they enter the church. The church I go to, there are 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 2 in the outer vestibule and 3 more actually in the chapel, the synagogue of the church where I go now, on occasion, like once a month. And it's very nice. It's very traditional. I like the reverent approach to the Creator. But I also like just chilling out in nature and talking to God that way. So you see, though, when there are important decisions to be made and they maybe feel like they're not getting an answer in prayer, but they don't blame it on God, right? It's us. We need a way to connect with God, and God gave us these means. But a lot of people are told that it's wicked. A lot of people just stop listening. They won't even hear the information. And my problem with this is they're trying to cause division amongst people. They want Christians against the rainbow flaggers. They want Christian denominations against each other. They want the children against the adults. And they want the citizens against the government. It is just a force of destruction and chaos at this time. And hopefully, usually in the kingdom, there is a season of rebirth after that and of peace. Just getting there seems to be taking a little while. So this talks about some of his ventures and where he went. I think this was that's weird. She kind of looks like me. Just the eyes and the nose or whatever. Anyways, this is a good introduction for the Tophats. We are going to get into more of the mysticism related to it, but you can also see, let me get rid of this. You can also see it in Dr. Sleep, where again you have the icy blue-eyed beings, people, whatever you want to call them, with the top hat, and allegedly witches, vampires, whatever you want to call them. The witch is the sequel to The Shining. Now their eyes shine once they take in the essence of a child who passed on in an extreme height of fear. So here you have, it is related to adrena chroma. So there they go into talking about it a little bit. It's a battered silk top hat, which is the source of her nickname. She uses that as a prop, playing the role of a friendly magician when she is anything but. Her disarming charm is part of her terrifying nature, and she shows no remorse for the many children she has ended over her centuries plus lifespan. Okay? It's just her nature. It's just what she does. She doesn't even see it as wrong anymore because she has gone over to that side of the thinking. And this is where, again, we have to stay balanced. We can't allow ourselves to be taken away. Is this a real thing? I've shown you in other videos where, yes, they do actually make that. It's in things like EpiPens, which do save people's lives. I have 2 EpiPens because of bees. Most people with bee or peanut allergies, you understand what I mean. Although I think, again, this is something that is greatly exaggerated now that I have looked into it and have gone to more holistic means myself, but I'm not a doctor and this is not medical advice. So that's a good beginning. It's been an hour. It's a good beginning for the Top Hat introduction. If you find any cool links that you'd like to share and see in the next installment of the Top Hat research, do let me know. Why are we looking into this, though? Well, again, because everything else we've looked into, top hats have been present. And I noticed that, like, after doing a couple talks about Alice in Wonderland and then doing the Dr. Sleep video, the first one we did was a couple years ago, and it was live, so we were able to discuss certain things. I might start doing a different type of live just to see if the comments work better. And I'm really just wanting a regular camera. I did find a Walkman. I have a Walkman now, and a couple of cassette tapes. And I got the Walkman itself for under $20 on Amazon. So I don't know if anything was put into it, but at least it's not a phone with a tracker, and I can listen to songs that I want to listen to when I want to. And for me, that's a first step from moving away from digitally received information. We're going to look at that too, magnetic tape. I found something really interesting on that in regards to the supernatural and ghosts. If you believe in ghosts, spirits, the dead, whatever, I might do a short on that and post that in the next day or two, so watch for that. So again, please share any information you find. The teeth and the top hats, things like this will be ongoing research as more things happen, because again, we seem to be one of the channels setting the trends. And I don't know, it's weird. It's like the channels I'm sub to then start are they watching me in my private time and I don't know it because they're talking about things I'm talking about almost at the same time, but a little bit after. It's cool to see that like the public consciousness is starting to notice things and observe things again. So hopefully critical thinking follows with that. But until then, pray for those who seek to do you harm. Pray for your families. Be mindful. Be consciously aware of what you're doing and when you're doing it. That way you maintain control and the master of your domain and in control of your own sovereignty at all times. That's key. And hopefully a face-to-face video soon. I'm starting to get my legs under me again after working after so long being off. I'm not working much at all, so I'm not complaining. I'm just saying things will be a little more organized once I am a little more organized. But I appreciate you guys being here. I'm sorry if the comments weren't working. Sorry if this wasn't super exciting. But I had to get away from some of the other stuff for a minute because it does get intense. But if you are with the LDS Church and you've been with them for a while, because the people I speak with locally seem to be very green, which there's nothing wrong with that. I would like to speak to somebody who actually knows about certain things, and I have a few very specific questions I would like to ask. I will not air this information. It's a personal, private conversation I would like to have. So if anyone's open to that, also let me know. As always, I love you guys. Pray for me as I pray for you. Have a blessed day. And watch for a few things because I had a few high strangeness incidents occur recently. But of course, I can't think of them at the moment. Oh, only when I was studying trying to do my family tree, it kept telling me I couldn't make any connections because the individual I was trying to connect was 150 years dead. And that individual is me. So, and I know computers glitch and I know they give us a hard time, but it's just funny. I thought it was funny and I would tell you guys about it. Oh, and I made a phone call to SSI to report a change. And I'm telling you this because if you watched QOC, Matt of Quantum of Consciousness, a while back, and I don't watch him right now, and there's a reason I don't watch certain people for a certain amount of time, but I'll get into that if you want later. He did a video on how when you call places, like, what are they actually doing? There's no way it could take that long. Are they just messing with people? Is that part of the social experiment? And I would have to say yes, because I had information on my fridge from the last time I talked to them to make sure I knew the limits of what I could make and what to report and all, just logistics of stuff. And I wrote down the person's name and the date that I spoke with them because that's how I maintain business. People who tell me I don't know what I'm talking about or I'm misremembering things, really, you have no idea how much you do not know about me as a human being. Everywhere I've ever worked and most people that know me know I'm like the queen of research and lists. And if I don't have the answer, I will seek it out for you and I will find it until I find it. So this person that I talked to a year and a half ago, mind you, his name was Glenn. The other day when I called, this person's name was Glenda. And it was a female, or presented as such. And I was like, well, can you type in this information for me into my account, until I get you in the interim, until I get you my pay stubs. And I would swear as I'm on the phone, you know how when somebody like fake types, like maybe you do for a kid or you do a simulation at work where you're in training and you just pretend to type, so you do clickety clack. I swear the person, when I asked them like, can you just make notes on my account? They just like, and I could audibly hear them sigh like, and then it was like somebody was just putting their fingernails above the keyboard and just mashing a bunch of keys together. It was a strange call, and I flashed back to the video where Matt talked about that on his channel. And I do. There's something very strange happening in these times, especially in America. And we're seeing that illusion is starting to falter, which is a good thing, if you ask me. It might be hard for a while, but it's a good thing that needs to happen. So if you have any stories of high strangeness happening to you, it helps the rest of us feel less alone. So feel free to share those in the comments or send them to me, and I can do a video if you'd like anonymously, because sometimes sharing does help. But you guys stay blessed. Have a great day. We will talk again soon. And thank you for being here. I love you guys.